James Cameron's Avatar. No, not the one with that bald kid with the arrow pointing to his face over his forehead. Not that one. Rather, the one that succeeded with a blue alien girl, only for a couple years, only like a decade later to be taken away by a green alien girl. A nominee that of one of the best movies that went from blue to green. James Cameron's Avatar is a huge success and still widely is, as the new sequel is said to be coming out soon. After a couple delays by James Cameron, the sequel has been pushed back quite a bit, and I do hope it is released soon. But back to the main movie itself, I'm here to talk about the extreme deity of the Na'vi, of Pandora itself, Eywa. In the movie, I've rewatched the movie, and I've seen how Eywa really is in the eyes of the Na'vi. The Na'vi see her as their great goddess. They say that Eywa is in charge of keeping check of Pandora's ecosystem. But how does she do that? What is Eywa exactly? What are her capabilities? What are her limits? And what's her end goal? This is something I've had to that I've questioned for over a little while, and I'll go over all the facts that I know about her. And I refer to her because that's what the Na'vi call Eywa, a goddess in a sense, or the All Mother. So I'll just refer to Eywa as a her or whatever. I believe I have the justification for that. Eywa, in the eyes of the Na'vi, as I've explained, is in charge of keeping check of the ecosystem of Pandora. She's said to be in everything and practically holds the balance of life and death through the ecosystem. But what we also see is that when Jake is taken to the Well of Souls, near the middle of the movie by Neytiri, Neytiri shows Jake how Eywa actually has remembered all of the voices of her ancestors. And I've wondered, how is that possible? If she's really a goddess or something, then sure, you could just say that the souls of the Na'vi are within her grasp, and technically the Well of Souls would just be like a way to access to the afterlife. But I've tried to think of things more, scientifically, I suppose I could say, and I realized something. The Na'vi have that special capability of using that little appendix that kind of comes off their head that they use with their hair in order to connect with other animals. So that way they can just ride animals without having to domesticate them. This is something that it's likely Eywa gave the Na'vi. I believe Eywa rather copies the very imagination, in a sense, of, or at least the very thoughts of the Na'vi into the Well of Souls. Because as explained, the Well of Souls is as explained by Dr. Grace Augustine, Pandora has a huge connection of trees and so on, and it basically acts like an online web where the Na'vi can go to places like the Well of Souls to access and download data. But really, the house is more of the one who rules the house is the one really at play here, and I believe that's Eywa. Eywa connects with all life. She essentially, in a way, is like a super organism. Technically, an entire organism in a sense. I don't know if she has like an extreme home base or something. No, that is not the Well of Souls, but rather she is everywhere, all across Pandora. She is life itself within like the trees and so on, and a little bit through the animals. I believe she's like a super organism that controls life itself on Pandora. And by doing that, she's able to practically manipulate evolution itself. So what Eywa did was practically force the evolution of everything on Pandora around that you see, and practically still is. Eywa made the Na'vi by an unknown ancestor. I've seen videos that explain how, hey, maybe the Na'vi are not native to Pandora. Maybe they're like actual humanoids. All that subjection and theory about the Na'vi not being native. But really, I feel like there was an ancestor of the Na'vi, but they were wiped out by Eywa. Eywa is forcing the evolution of everything on Pandora to her will, practically subjecting all life on Pandora to whatever she pleases to make. And so she created the Na'vi, a super race that she believed she could easily control and maybe over time create to be the prime rulers over Pandora. And in order to do that, she created them to have that appendix ability with being able to connect with their brains practically with the environment around them. They connect with the animals in order to ride them and just do whatever with them. And practically stealing their will out of the animals themselves in order to do that. And as well as to connect with the tree, with areas like the Well of Souls and so on. And while people are like connecting with the Well of Souls, I believe, while they think that they're just talking with their ancestors, really that's just ones of the past, because when they're connecting with the Well of Souls, I believe that Eywa, or at least the Well of Souls, is actually like making a download of all of your memories, all your thoughts, practically your very brain, like downloading a copy of your brain and then storing it into the Well of Souls. And they've been doing that for so long. So really, when the Na'vi are going to the so-called Well of Souls and hearing all the voices of their ancestors, they're just going through all the downloads of their ancestors' brains. That is all stored within the Well of Souls, or within Eywa herself. And Eywa is able to download this data, we should say, and then she's able to just act this out, force the evolution, like I said, of animals around her, make her next move with every new download of a Na'vi brain she gets of what to do next for her evolutionary plan. But then humanity came along and started to started to tear up her plans. And but it's likely that Eywa probably noticed how humanity has actually spread across the stars, across the sky in a sense. While this may seem incomprehensible to Eywa, if you've watched the movie James Cameron's Avatar, you notice how Jake actually connected with the Well of Souls both in the middle of the movie before a certain scene and near the end before the extreme battle where Jake asks Eywa for his help in order to stop this. Now, it's likely Eywa downloaded Jake's very brain to get a better understanding and comprehension of what's really going on, combined with Grace Augustine's brain as well. Eywa now has quite possibly a perfect, if not a very good understanding of what humanity or what humans actually are. And it's possible that she might change her plans. Now, granted, Eywa did help Jake by practically turning the very planet of Pandora against the RDA by having literally swarms of animals and so on coming down on them. But it's likely Eywa just was doing that to defend the Well of Souls. And the Na'vi, her little experimentation, her little plan. But the Na'vi are self-thinking and can think for themselves as well as humans. The Na'vi aren't really at fault here because they're actual people. They're capable of thinking and doing the same things that humanity are. And I'm not justifying that the RDA are good either. The RDA definitely made some morally questionable choices, trying to wipe out an entire people who are perfectly capable of thinking on the same capacity and level that they are by giving them and justified wiping them out under the brand of savage. But while the RDA definitely made some very bad choices, the unobtainium on the planet can be used to increase the technology of humans to continue their exploration through space and save themselves from the destruction of Earth. And while the RDA executed this plan very poorly and ended up costing them, humanity can still come back and maybe wise up and, try and peacefully negotiate with the Na'vi in order to extract unobtainium and then gain the technology they need from it in order to increase their technology to advance through space. Meanwhile, the Na'vi, I don't know if they're able to break off the ties with Eywa or not, but Eywa definitely is something that we should question on how she's bending the very whims of evolution itself to her will. And after the full-scale battle of humanity and seeing what humans quite possibly actually are, she might actually change her plans a little bit. Maybe change the very evolutionary pattern of the Na'vi to resemble something more like humans, so that way she herself can spread her influence among the stars. Eywa is not, and if Eywa really is a super organism, it's likely she doesn't quite care about the Na'vi all that much, or, about other organisms, but rather herself. And so, as any other organism, she wants to extend her chances of survival, and by doing that, it's likely she'll probably try and transform the Na'vi once again in her own little evolutionary pattern way, the same way that she has to force the Na'vi so that way they can have appendixes in order to connect with the environment around them and so on. It's likely she could change the Na'vi to be more like humans in order to go out among the stars, spread her influence and her lifestyle and so on. Or just in general, extend Eywa's survivability herself. Now, Eywa we've seen her actually change this quite a bit. We've seen her change evolution itself. We can just see how the flora and fauna around them is perfectly suited so that way the Na'vi can just tap into the flora and fauna around them in order to benefit themselves. And Eywa has actually done this a lot. For example, if you know about, how earlier in the movie, throughout the movie, Neytiri explains to Jake about a time of great sorrow. Long before humanity came to Pandora, there was a time when all the clans were warring with each other, and they were starting to fight. It's likely that Eywa didn't want the Na'vi to fight and get at each other's throats, and so in order to stop this, so that way she could continue to subject the Na'vi to further evolutionary planning of her own, she then created Tu'mactau, a Na'vi who then was able to take control of a great Leonoctrix. And it's quite likely, now if you think about it, it's quite likely that maybe, just maybe, Jake was subjected to the same plan that Eywa used earlier. The greatly Tuamaktau in the Lenavi legend or song united all the clans together in the times of great sorrow in order to stop the fighting and to then distance each other so that way they wouldn't fight each other anymore. If you think about it, Jake did the same thing. It's quite possible that when Jake contacted with the Well of Souls earlier, Eywa downloaded Jake's brain, came up with an idea on what to do, and then used the same plan that she used with Tuamaktau to download into Jake's brain, which then influenced him to go over and take control of the Great Liam Nocturix that he did take over, or the Turuk, as the Na'vi call it. And he did. He united all the clans together, and together they fought back against the RDA. This wasn't enough, of course. Eywa ended up forcing her hand, like I said earlier, and as you see in the movie, to get all of the animals to practically whoop the RDA's butts back off of Pandora. But Eywa can be very questionable. She's a supreme organism that connects all across Pandora, forces the evolution of all life around it to her whims and the Na'vi themselves. The Na'vi are not connected with Eywa. They are under Eywa's mercy, who acting as goddess over a people, over all life on a planet, and it can be very questionable on Eywa's morals. Whatever Eywa likely is, it's likely that she's just a super organism, and as such, just plans to extend her survivability. Meanwhile, humanity, as we see in the movie, humanity didn't make the best choices, but there were good humans that did care for the other people, like the people that went rogue, such as Jake and Dr. Grace Augustine, who actually cared about the Na'vi and their lifestyles and their lives in general. Meanwhile, the RDA didn't really care that much, but at least they had some moral dilemma, especially the main runner of the RDA, who was shipping the unobtainium. He definitely wanted to avoid the fighting so that way he could just extract the unobtainium peacefully. He didn't want there to be any fighting. While humanity actually shows some sense of compassion for the Na'vi, and the Na'vi actually have adopted some human characteristics over time, whether that was Eywa's plan or not, it's not likely. It's likely Eywa just adopted these human-like attributes into the Na'vi so that way they could care for each other as a combined community. But the Na'vi actually empathize with the humans as well. They're both actual people, but Eywa is just a supreme organism that likely doesn't sympathize with the humans that much. And so it's likely that Eywa would just force the Na'vi to go through another track of planned evolution as usual, quite possibly changing her plans. And humanity did screw up its first trial of being on Pandora by sending a money-hungry company of the RDA that didn't quite sympathize with the native people of the Na'vi too well. But if given another chance, humanity could find a way to peacefully extract the unobtainium and then actually have a chance to become a good space-faring people. Meanwhile, they could even offer the same opportunities to the Na'vi, who, like I said, are capable of thinking and having the same empathizing and capabilities as humans. They're not savages. They're just somewhat primitive people that have been forced under the subjection of a supreme overlord goddess superorganism that quite possibly plans to manipulate the Na'vi again. So yeah, the RDA, they're bad, and they plan things very poorly, but humanity quite possibly could save the Na'vi people from their supreme ruling over goddess of Eywa that probably just wants to extend her own survivability and influence. But this is just my thought. This is what Eywa likely really is. We know that she is connected to all life across Pandora and is supposed to keep the ecosystem in check, which just means that she has control over evolution of the planet, of the animals and plants of the planet itself as well. And the Na'vi very well are probably just tools to Eywa's bidding, as Eywa didn't really do much to warn the Na'vi of any peaceful negotiations with the humans, which led to the RDA then attacking them. I'm not justifying what the RDA did in order to extract unobtainium, but they definitely could have managed going through with that better. But there quite possibly could be a greater villain behind all of this. A supreme organism playing God. Anyway, that's my thought of Eywa. And I do hope in the sequel this is clarified in some way by James Cameron, or we get a better picture of what Eywa really is. This is just the best data I have on Eywa. And I hope that Eywa isn't like some really demented goddess-like organism. But anyways, that's this video about what Eywa is, what quite possibly could be her angles, what the Na'vi could really be doing or be subjected to, and what humanity could do better.